Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Laura Washington's seminar. This is part of the newly founded ChiElect program covering issues, concerns, and candidates sure to play a major role in the next mayoral election. Laura Washington has more than 2 decades of experience as a print and broadcast journalist, as well as a nonprofit professional. She has served as the editor for the Chicago Reporter, a nationally recognized publication covering race and poverty, as well as deputy press secretary to Harold Washington, Chicago's first African-American mayor. She is currently a columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times, specializing in media-related issues, African-American affairs, local and national politics, and social justice. She also serves as a political analyst for ABC 7 Chicago. We are also delighted to have mayoral candidate Gery Chico here this afternoon to discuss his vision of the city and why he is running for mayor. Mr. Chico is an attorney with extensive government experience as the former president of Chicago Board of Education, board president of the Chicago Park District, board chairman of the City Colleges of Chicago, the list goes on, and chair of the Illinois Board of Education. He was born on the South Side and has never left. A reminder that today's seminar is on the record, so you are free to take photos and videos. Thank you for attending, and let's get started.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, and welcome to all of you guys for being here. Thank you. It's cold out there, and thanks for braving the snow, and thanks to you, Gery, for doing the same. We were just talking a few minutes ago about it's cold, but it ain't that cold, right?
This is Chicago, not Miami.
And you made a great point about there's all this Sturm and Drang about this week and about how cold it's going to get, but this is kind of chump change compared to the good old days of
84
Chicago.
and 85, you and I were just talking. With the wind chill, I think it was like 75 below zero. So, I mean, this is not the worst it's been. I mean, we don't want to make too light of it because obviously a lot of people can be affected by it, especially children going to school. But, you know, I worry most about homeless people. I mean, I'm telling you, I've been driving around this whole city and seeing these tent compounds opening up, and they've been there for a while already. And I worry about what people are going to do when it hits these temperatures. I mean, we certainly have the shelter capacity, but some people have been so used to just living where they want to live and how they want to live. I don't know if against what would be in their best interest, they stay there. And I worry about it. I think it's a real human crisis, especially when the weather gets to be the way it is. So I'm very concerned about that.
Well, we were talking before, and I mean, I was saying that, you know, the mayor's race is not going to be front and center, I'm sorry to say, this week because the weather is going to be front and center.
Sure.
But the weather could become a story. It could become part of the mayor's race in the sense that how responsive is the city, how responsive is the current administration being?
Absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts about what if you were around right now, what you'd be doing that he's not doing to address this big concern?
As an old chief of staff and a current mayoral candidate, I know what the snow did in 1979 to bring about an entire shift in city politics. It killed the machine in 1979 and brought us a mayor by the name of Jane Byrne. And having been in the mayor's office for a number of years, you really learn about preparation for conditions like this, whether it's cold, snow, or heat. In this case, we have both. We have snow and cold upon us, and there are a number of things that you do as a standard procedure, opening your warming centers, I see the Park District, thankfully, I used to head that as well, is using its field houses for temporary warming centers so that people can get out of the cold. Like today, frankly, I wasn't happy about the way the streets were plowed. I thought they should have been plowed a little sooner. But, you know, you're on all of these different aspects that can affect people's lives. We urge people to check on the elderly in their neighborhood. You know, heaters go out. And when a heater goes out, and if you're an elderly person, you may not be able to deal with it right away. And so what do? You sit in your house until the temperature comes down to below freezing? People can die. It's that dire. So I think there's a number of things that we as a city have to do, and then we all together as neighbors and communities need to do to watch out for our fellow citizens.
Okay. Now, you got the political bug as a young man, we were just talking a few minutes ago, as an intern, a college intern, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Tell us about your first internship and what you did and why that turned you on.
Well, I was a senior at the University of Illinois at Chicago in political science. Anybody else here in political science? I don't know, maybe a couple. All right, good. And they were offering a special program where you can get 4 hours of credit if you did 1 semester of government service. I thought that was a pretty good deal. And so I went out there hunting, right, to see who I might join up with in the government to get this 4 hours of credit. And I was fortunate to be hired in the City of Chicago Department of Planning. They took me on, and it was barely any pay in the beginning, but I was there for the experience and the credit. And the first job that I had there was working on industrial retention in the City of Chicago. And that was because a lot of the manufacturers in the city were beginning to leave for a couple of reasons. One, the city had just imposed a tax on employers based on the amount of employees you had. I mean, who in the world would ever conceive a policy like this? I mean, we're trying to encourage people to come.
And that was Richard J. Daley.
That was Richard J. Daley in 1974. Now, I'm sure he was motivated by what he thought was the right thing to do at the time to generate revenue for the city, but it turned out to be an ill-conceived policy that took us many, many years to get rid of. And we, fortunately, when I was there, we began to get rid of it when I was working for Mayor Daley. But the other thing that was going on is the world economies were causing change in where manufacturing located. China was just coming up on the world platform. Mexico. And so a lot of the jobs in injection molding, metal stamping, and the old hard industries of the past were leaving because they can get labor at a much cheaper rate with much less regulation of their industries in other parts of the world. So companies were starting to leave Chicago. So I was part of a larger SWAT team along with who is now my law partner, Marcus Nunes, was that student at Northwestern University that they paired me up with. We've only been together 40 years, as now we're law partners. We hit the streets, and they put us into these industrial and commercial areas, and we had to go knock on the doors of companies and ask to talk with the owner. Well, we had a few doors slammed in our face, as you might imagine, because we say, "You're from where to do what?" Boom, door closes. But there were an awful lot of company owners and senior managers and companies that did talk to us. And it's a wonderful experience because it threw you right in the deep end of the pool. You either swim or you don't. And so
you learned a lot about government and how government works and doesn't work.
I was telling Laura earlier that our job was not to take service requests from company owners like tow abandoned car, fix light, fix pothole. We weren't supposed to be doing that, but I broke the rules. I absolutely did that. In addition to the purpose I was there for, which was to write up the conditions that we saw and what was said to us by these company owners so we could look for trends and try to develop plans on a wider scale that could make it easier for them to stay in Chicago and make the city more appealing to those businesses. That's how I broke in.
And you ended up staying in government for a while, working for
Well,
a very important city council committee, and you went to law school, and that was all.
Laura, tell me about that. How many times in your life have you said, "I'm only going to do something for a short period of time"? I thought this was going to be 1 semester, and it turned out to be 10 years.
Right.
Because I liked it. I caught the bug when I was there. And I did further work in the planning department. And then there was a chairman of the largest committee of the city council. His name was Wilson Frost, who remains, was a friend of mine. Great guy. He was kind of an iconic figure in Chicago. He should have been the first African-American mayor of Chicago. But as part of the underbelly of our history, if you remember this, when Wilson went up to claim the office, they shut the doors on him.
When Richard J. Daley died.
When Richard J. Daley died, Wilson Frost was the vice mayor of the city. And by law, he should have been able to walk in that office and be the mayor of Chicago. And instead, the forces that be shut the doors on him and shut him out. And after a long negotiation, they brokered a solution that had him becoming the chairman of the most powerful committee in the city council, the finance committee that reviewed all the budget and tax matters, and then a guy by the name of Mike Bolandic, who was the alderman of the 11th Ward, became the mayor. That period of time never sat well with me. I thought it was wrong, but I enjoyed working for Wilson Frost. He was a smart guy. I had some other friends there. Ed Bell is the guy that actually hired me, because Ed was working for Wilson Frost. And I really cut my teeth in that committee. I learned how to look at budgets financial proposals, tax proposals, and you learn, and it's like drinking out of a fire hose. But that's what got me started. And then I stayed in that committee through 2 additional chairmen until about 1986, when I went over to, I then went to law school while I was there at night. I urge you all, anybody in law school? Not yet. Oh, there you go. So I went to law school at night, and then when I had my law degree about a year and a half, I started looking because I wanted to practice law. And I wound up going to Sidley, downtown Chicago. So I was there for a number of years.
So fast forward, you've been involved in many levels of politics and government, as we've seen here and heard. Now you're running for mayor. This is your 2nd time running for mayor. You ran against Rahm Emanuel and some others
Yes.
8 years ago. What are your priorities this time around? What are your 3 top priorities coming into office, and why do you think that you're the right person at this time to be mayor?
I think I bring the, just by virtue of that resume right there, I think we're missing one though too, but that's okay. By virtue of my experience across all those platforms in government, local and state, and the depth of experience, I've never gone to a job in government yet where I just passed the time and was a caretaker. Any one of those jobs. I challenged convention wherever I went. When I was working for Richard Daley in the mayor's office, they used to do capital planning on a 5-year basis, and they would do capital improvements on a 5-year basis. Well, I took the 5-year plan and collapsed it into 1 year. We had ordinary policing in those days in the early 90s. It was call 911, the police would show up and react to what crime had occurred. We started an entirely new way of policing called community policing, which was designed to get out in front of the problems and make the community safer by encouraging dialogue between residents who lived on a beat. So Chicago's broken into districts and beats. So this is a beat right here. And there are police assigned to this beat on a more or less regular basis. And obviously there are people that live here. They would have monthly beat meetings, and they would start talking about the problems in the neighborhood, crime, what you're seeing, share intelligence, and there was a trust that built up between local police officers and the neighbors. And that changed things for the better. People were now believing again and sharing and coming to the meetings, learning about what the police knew and sharing with the police, you know what, that guy over there, he's not doing the right thing in his garage. You should really go check it out. All that made policing different and neighborhoods safer. So I enjoyed doing that. That was the chief of staff's office, just as one example. And then when I went to the public schools, I mean, you remember, the public schools were not in good shape in '95.
And you were president of the Board of Education at that time, working with your opponent, Paul Vallis, who was CEO of the
And I
public
remind
schools.
Paul, it was him and about 400 other people that made the Chicago public schools go.
Are you suggesting that Paul Vallis is trying to take too much credit and not sharing the credit with people like you?
It's not about credit, it's about truth. And the truth of the matter is that Paul did a fine job, and I say that. I'll say it 100 times. But it wasn't just him and me. You'll see that we're going to talk about education in this campaign, and sometimes you only get 30 seconds, so you got to say what you got to say. But in a longer format like this, there were lots of people, starting with the Board of Trustees, who were there. Sharon Gilliam, my friend Sharon Gilliam, was an excellent board member. Norm Bobbins, who was the chairman of LaSalle Bank, excellent board member. And then you had Paul Vallis, who did an extraordinary job, and all of his team that was there. I mean, there was an awful lot of people that resuscitated this district. To give you an example, it was $1.3 billion projected deficit over 4 years at the CPS because they always spent more than they took in. And so that created a deficit. There was such an academic malaise that they had to release the test scores on Friday nights to bury them in the weekend papers. The buildings were literally falling apart. For example, Ray School, right over here. We had to deal with that to get new windows, roof, and tuck pointing, just to start. But the buildings like Ray School right over here were falling apart. The Sun-Times was running a series highly critical of the condition of crumbling schools. Remember that? And the management had a horrible set of relations with the teachers union. Constant strife, fights, threat of strikes. This is what we walked into. We had labor peace for 8 years, 2 4 successive year contracts that were done fairly quickly with the teachers. In fact, the second one was done a year early, so that we can give peace of mind to parents and students that their schools would be open. We spent more than $3 billion doing projects like Ray School and many others throughout the city to give kids a decent place to go to school. We built 74 new buildings. You know, I can go down the line. Simeon High School, vocational high school, brand new building. I went down there one day and saw the old place and said, oh my God, we got to get out of here. And, you know, Gwendolyn Brooks, and I'll work my way from the south up north. Gwendolyn Brooks College Prep. I'm so proud of that because we bought it for a small amount of money from the Augustinian Fathers, and we put about $50 million into it, and it's one of the prettiest properties the Board of Education has today. And it is sending kids to schools like this, the Ivy League, and the Big Ten. I mean, that makes me proud, and I can keep going on and on.
And you have a great track record, and it's something you could be proud of. Going forward, though, you mentioned crime and policing. You've mentioned schools. City finances is another big issue.
Yes.
Tick off for us in each one of those categories what you will do as mayor that will
Yes.
that will make the difference.
With regard to education, starting there again, what's happened since I left in 2001 is we have taken our foot off the gas pedal and we have gotten a little bit soft. And most importantly, excellent education opportunity is uneven across this city. You cannot count on a great school being in your neighborhood. It's just the way it is. So you get in your car, you get in your train, and you go find one. I'm going to change that. I'm going to bring educational excellence to every part of this city. We started when I was there before with Jones, Peyton, Northside, and Brooks. We need to make sure that we finish the job. This is what parents want. It's not what I want. They want that. So we have to bring even education opportunity throughout the city.
And how will you do that, though? I mean, are you going to open new schools? Are you going to repurpose some of the, one of the big issues is the 50 schools that were closed.
Yeah.
Are you going to repurpose those schools?
Yes.
Where you stand on the elected Board of Education?
We have to repurpose some of the 50 closed schools. We have to repurpose some of the schools right now, the high schools that have 200 students that were designed for 1,500 students. In some cases, we will build new facilities. Go to Lakeview. Nobody from Lakeview goes to Lakeview High School. This is wrong. It's broken. It's got to be fixed. People are getting up and leaving the city. We're losing lots of people. When I was chairman of the Chicago School Board, we had 440,000 students. Today we have 360. That's 80,000 students.
So when you say repurposing schools, does that mean you're going
trade
to
schools?
Okay, and would you also repurpose them into community centers, other non-educational purposes?
All
Okay.
the above.
But
I mean,
so all of those schools, so you think can be salvaged?
absolutely.
Okay.
Most.
Okay.
Some that are old and require too much money to fix, you may have to make a park or some other use out of it. But a lot of them can be put back to use, and there's been a lot of great proposals given to us. We just haven't acted on them quickly enough. But I want to create a major expansion in vocational and technical education because many students won't do what you're doing and go to a fine university like this. They need to finish high school and start working right away. I want them to have an apprenticeship certificate so they could start working in a trade perhaps. And I've already talked with leaders of the trade unions who have a very strong interest in doing this. With regard to crime, guess what? We have to bring back community policing. There's a consent decree right now that has been suggested, that's been proposed, it's in the federal court by the mayor, Rahm Emanuel, and the former Attorney General, Lisa Madigan, that's supposed to outline how we're going to police going forward. I'm fine with that. The first chapter in the decree is bring back community policing. We can do a whole lot better job in establishing relationships, building trust again between people and police officers by just doing the fundamentals.
Where do you, can I just interrupt you there? Where do you stand on the Fraternal Order of Police? Their position is they don't want a consent decree at all. They're very much against a lot of what's in it, and they went to court over it. So you disagree with it? Assuming it'll be approved by the court, what's your strategy for working with FOP? They represent all the police officers in the city. As particularly right now, they have a contract that's coming up for renewal.
I've had no problem historically working with the police, working with the FOP, working with the police department, working with individual officers. We'll do it again. They will ultimately become resigned to the fact that this is going to be the law, and this is how we're going to operate. This year, the mayor's already appropriated about $25 million for the implementation with the monitor of the consent decree. It's here. It's the ship sailed. We're living with the consent decree, and it's a very sensible document for the most part.
And that's your message to the FOP: get on board. The ship has sailed. What does that mean for there's going to be contract issues that are underneath that consent decree, staffing and training and that kind of thing. How are you going to address
Which
those?
we have to have anyway. Nobody's done more collective bargaining agreements than me running in this race. said it last night, and everybody went, I said, yeah, take a look at it. When you do that many governments and you work with that many labor unions over that many years, trust me, I've seen it all. In any kind of negotiation, there's give and take. But there are things that we will not capitulate on or even be the subject of negotiation. Okay? I mean, as candidates, we've all answered questions about what we will and won't do. We have to reestablish trust and a solid policing foundation in this city again. Everybody wants the police, okay? Trust me. But they want the police to behave in a way that respects them, and I think that we can do that. I've seen it before. I know we can get back there again.
Okay.
And then we have to reinvest in our communities, okay? Look, we have been out to lunch on this for so many years. There are parts of this city that haven't been touched in 50 years. After Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, the west side of Chicago burned and was razed. And in many parts of that same part of the city, we haven't come back and done anything. Now, what is a child to think walking by on Chicago Avenue, all these boarded up buildings or vacancy? What kind of life is that? I don't want to see a child doing that anymore. But it takes everything we've got to bring resources into these areas. For example, my trade school idea. I've told labor we should put it right on the west side of Chicago and not do it as a little bitty building, but make it a campus where we have adjunct facilities that are associated with those trades. I mean, we can do grocery stores, we can do coffee shops, we can do a park, we can do other schools as part of a larger campus. And I want to do that. I think the money is there, both in terms of the city has to use its resources very wisely as incentives to lure developers to come do these things. But make no mistake about it, it is going to be private money that drives development in these parts of the city. The city's got to be a leader to make it happen.
So a big part of your plan to find the money will be around getting businesses, corporations, giving them incentives.
Developers.
Like TIFs? Where do you stand on the TIF program and how that should be used?
TIF program needs to be reformed. It is not transparent, and it is not using the money for its originally intended purposes under the law. That doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, because TIF is going to be one of our major local development tools that lures that larger private sector investment. We also have, under the new federal tax code, opportunity zone money. This is a place where if a developer is looking to, if they made a big capital gain on something they built and sold, well, there's a tax bill due and owing. Under the new federal tax law, you can defer that and not pay, maybe not have to pay it at all. If you invest in low-income areas that are all mapped out in Chicago, and you invest your money there, I want to take massive advantage of that. Look, I'm a real estate lawyer. I've been doing real estate development in this city for 32 years. I know how to combine a little bit of incentive with a lot of bit of private money and make things happen. I just am finishing the project's still going on, but since I started to run for mayor, I'm not practicing law anymore. Ogden Commons is in North Lawndale, just north of Sinai Hospital, was a vacant piece of land, 10 acres. We're going to build 400 units of affordable housing there, have 150,000 square feet of office space for jobs.
And whose development is this?
It's three parties, Habitat, Sinai Hospital Systems, and Cinespace. Anybody ever watch Chicago Fire, Chicago PD? That's where they film it, at Cinespace, right on the near west side of Chicago. So these three parties got together and said, we want to invest and develop in the neighborhood here. And it's going to be a beautiful project. Plus, there's going to be 20,000 feet of retail. You can get a cup of coffee now. You can take your dry cleaning. You can pick up a sandwich. I mean, these are not easy things to find in certain parts of the city.
So you see this as a model for what you want to do going forward as mayor?
It should work beautifully. It's a very, very small amount of public money, very small amount of public money.
How much do you know offhand?
Well, when I say public money, the CHA is contributing half of the land, and the developers that own like Sinai and the other folks are putting in the other half of the land.
So
And then the rest of it is CHA is putting in some small incentive money, which is, let's say they're putting in 10 to 15 million. It's going to lure 200 million in private sector money. 200 million. So these are the kind of ratios that we need to see so that we're not doing one-off projects. We can't put all our TIF money into one project because then we can't get to 10 other areas. So I think this is going to be a wonderful model. And here's what I like about this, Laura. It's not just housing. Just to do housing, well, where do you work? Where do you shop? Are the lights on beyond 10 o'clock? I mean, and I have to tell you, as I've been traveling across the city, I refamiliarized myself with all these neighborhoods that I either lived in or passed when I was a young man. Go to Devon Avenue. Go to Devon Avenue on the north side of Chicago, 6400 North, and see what happens to that street at night. It's Indian, Pakistanis, others from the Middle East have become shop owners, have put a ton of investment into these stores. I came out of a meeting where we were with the Pakistani community. We ended the meeting at 11:15 at night. 11:15 at night.
And
The
there was
street's
a lot
alive.
of action on the street, yeah.
It's just coming alive. People are going into the restaurants. People are buying clothing at 11 o'clock at night. Fully lit up, beautiful, safe. Safe. I want to do the same thing on 79th Street. I was with a friend of mine, Josephine Wade, 3 weeks ago.
Who owns the...
Mother Wade's, Captain Hard Times. So we're over there walking around, and she's showing me all the vacancies. I said, yeah, Josephine, but it doesn't have to be this way. If we can come up with $2.3 billion to lure Amazon, we can come up with a fraction of that to start refilling our vacant storefronts. I want to go, listen, this is going to be innovative. They've never seen anything like this. We're going to go to the entrepreneurs in this city, and they're in the community, right? Somebody wants to do a bakery. Somebody wants to do coffee. Somebody wants to do clothing. But it's hard to start a business because there's all these impediments up front. But if we work with you, and if we take some risk, we can start filling those stores. Here's the impediments. I can't come up with the security deposit for rent. I need 3 months of rent. I can't come up with the initial amount of money to buy my kitchen equipment. We can help with that. It's going to take some stretching, but remember, this is the city that was going to give Amazon $2.3 billion. For what? It's the richest company on the face of the earth. Let's help our own people.
Yeah.
We can repopulate that street. Jobs, tax revenues generated, life like Devon Avenue, the lights come on, crime goes down. I'm so excited about this, I can't wait to get going.
I can tell.
I can't wait to get going. I think it's going to be fabulous.
You're steeped in this stuff. So what about our pension, our
Pensions.
massive pension burden? That's another place where money is...
The pension burden is not as big and doom and gloom as people say. It's smaller than what we encountered at the Chicago Board of Education in 1995. That was $1.3 billion. This is $1 billion right now that we have to find in 4 years. To me, it's almost a luxury to have that amount of time, 4 years. At CPS, we're going to have 4 years.
$1 billion is a lot of money in a city where we have so many other financial, economic demands, though.
Yes.
So what's your plan for addressing it?
Number one, we're going to cut waste. How about that? Nobody in this campaign has talked about cutting. Nobody in the world. I've been with these guys for months. Nobody's talked about cutting waste. You got to cut waste. You're going to ask me where, right? The infrastructure trust is a mechanism that the mayor created. Good idea. It hasn't panned out over 7 years. It costs $2 million a year. It's a separate agency that's supposed to lure investment for our infrastructure, except it hasn't done any projects. 7 years.
So you would drop that?
Yeah, that's $2 million a year, and but don't worry, I already spent that money. I said that money's got to be put back into mental health facilities. I mean,
Reopening the mental health facility?
Yeah. It's about $2 million, so we can almost get that done. But beyond that, I've also, look, we have to take a fresh look at government, okay? We do not need a clerk's office. We do not need a treasurer's office. Each costs about $4.5 million a year, and I defy you to tell me what either does. The clerk's office issues city stickers for your car, for your vehicle. If we can't get that done with software over online, we're not thinking.
That will take legislative action to make that happen, though. You can't, as a mayor, go in and eliminate those offices.
Well,
those are elective offices.
I've got news for you. As a mayor, you champion a lot of things that ultimately lead to change that aren't easy. These aren't layups, but you got to force the issue.
So you would introduce legislation to eliminate them?
Oh, I think. And by the way, I got a good one for you. We're not only going to introduce legislation on that stuff. Can I jump to ethics for 1 minute?
Sure.
We want to get rid of what's known as aldermanic prerogative, where any alderman in any ward has the power of life and death over a project. They say yes, no. That's outrageous. Lincoln Yards, a $6 billion project in Lincoln Park, was decided by one man. Is this outrageous or what? Who in the world? The alderman up there, Brian Hopkins, good man, by the way. This is nothing personal. It's just structurally wrong. There's so much that the city needed to weigh in on that as a broad city matter.
Do you aside from how the decision was made, do you support Lincoln Yards as a
I
project?
might
or-
have wanted to keep the stadium.
Yeah.
I mean, we need the money. You talked about we need a lot of
Soccer
money, right?
stadium, uh-huh.
The soccer stadium with 20,000 seats, the amusement tax alone that would come out of that would be a lot of money to our budget. But it was wiped out because some in the community didn't like it. Well, I got news for you. What the University of Chicago brings to the city of Chicago cannot be decided by one woman in this case, Leslie Harrison, who's a friend of mine. It's way beyond that. So you have to be careful with allowing these momentous decisions to be made by one person. So that's called the elimination of aldermanic prerogative.
Okay, what else?
I also want to ban all outside income to anybody working for the city, aldermen included. The aldermen make about $117,000 a year. Not bad pay, right? You don't need to be making any other money. Stay on the job we give you, okay? You do those two things, we'll clean up this mess that we're looking at with ethics in no time.
What
But
about term limits?
I'm for term limits.
What
Whether
are
it's 2
specific-
or 3, I could live with either.
For mayor,
Mayor too. Yeah.
mayor and alderman?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
You're not going to see any more mayors that go on 20, 22 years. That stuff's over. People aren't, they're not interested in it. They don't want to see it. I don't think it's going to happen. But now how are all these changes going to come? Do you think the aldermen are going to vote these in?
No.
Thank you. So I've proposed another mechanism to get this done called the Chicago Ballot Initiative. I want the voters of this city to entertain a binding referendum on the elimination of aldermanic prerogative, the banning of outside income, and term limits. Let's let the citizens of Chicago decide what their city should look like.
And this would be binding?
Binding, yeah. So there's already, under the Illinois Constitution, you have the ability to do this. We'll probably have to go to court. I'm not being naive about this, but because you know what happens, Laura. Right now there's another provision in law that says you can only have 3 referendum on any one election cycle. Oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to have whether or not cats should wear tags is one of the question equated with whether we end aldermanic prerogative. I think these are binding referenda. The others are advisory, and we ought to look at these things differently. But if you really want to bring change to the Chicago government, then let's really do it. Let's not just, right now, they're a little proposal here, a little proposal there. They're waiting for it to blow over. You saw what happened. I mean, the aldermen were more worried about who was snitching.
Yes.
I mean, this is
Well,
wrong.
that brings me to the snitch question that you're referring to, Danny Solis, who was recently revealed it was wearing a wire on Ed Burke, and Ed Burke, of course, is in deep trouble legally, too. You worked for a long time with Ed Burke. He's a friend of yours. He came out and said before he had his own troubles that you thought you were the best candidate for mayor. Explain why that shouldn't give voters pause. And you're talking about ethics now. You're talking about all these reforms now, but you weren't talking about them until, correct me if I'm wrong, you weren't talking about them in any way that came out before. Oh, you were talking specifically about aldermanic prerogative and term limits?
Different things. At that time,
Okay.
we were talking about transparency.
So anyway, so
Still time.
explain your relationship with Ed Burke and how you feel about
Ed Burke,
this
I've
investigation.
most of the top candidates have known Ed Burke. He's been in the government for 50 years. I think I'm the only one that didn't disavow him and say that I never knew him, really. I said, yes, I did know him. I don't agree with what he did. So you could know somebody and not agree with what they did or how they acted. And his comments about me are not atypical. A lot of people have said in your business and in the city, Gery Chico, because of that resume and what he did in that resume, is the most qualified candidate to be mayor of Chicago. I mean, I happen to believe that, or I wouldn't be running. And so that's what I see in the matter. And remember, in your lives, you're always going to meet people. You're always going to meet people, and you're going to have long-time relationships with people. And the question is, you are not them, and they are not you. You always stand on your own 2 feet. We have to be careful by attaching too much to associations. We have to be who we are. And I think you could do something wrong, but that doesn't mean you're me and I'm you.
Right, but you have a long-time relationship with him. You know him well. It looks like the feds were recording him for quite a long period of time. There's something like 14th, I forget, there's a huge number of conversations that were recorded.
Yeah.
Do you think you're on any of those phone calls?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I would call him and tell him how I'm doing in the campaign. I'm working hard. Here's what's going on. But you would have to, I think there's going to probably be a lot of recordings with a lot of candidates on them, because I don't think this was the only conversation being recorded. So we've seen, look at Toni Preckwinkle. She's probably on those tapes. She received $115,000 from a fundraiser that the alderman threw from her. I'm sure that she's on those tapes. In fact, she just admitted the other day that she met with him about a job for his son. So Susanna Mendoza, I'm sure she's on those tapes as well. Bill Daley's probably on those tapes. So, you know, you can only go so far with these things. Again, the line is the line. You stay on the right side of the line. You never use your public office for personal gain.
So you're not worried about anything that's on those tapes in terms of your conversations? You're sleeping at night?
I'm sleeping at night.
Maybe a lot of other
I'm
people
too tired to
do
do anything but.
All right, I want to just ask you one more question, and then we're going to open up to you guys. There are a lot of young people in this room, and there are several people who are on the ballot who are quite a bit younger than you, who are making the case.
What are you talking about?
Who are making the case that it's time for new voices, fresh faces. You know, you've never held elective office before, but you've been in government for your entire career.
Yes.
What is your message to maybe some of the folks out on campus here who might be listening to that message from the younger voices? What do you offer? What are you bringing to young people that means that they should look at you?
Well, I don't think your age defines who you are, first of all. I have children, I have grandchildren, and believe me, they'll keep me up to speed on what's going on. The other day, my 10-year-old grandson grabbed my phone and started playing his playlists in the car, and I liked his music. He had Post Malone, he had Marshmello, he had all these other folks. And I said, you know, I kind of like this stuff. So age is a matter of where you put yourself. I think as a good public official, you have to relate to everybody. I mean, I'm just as concerned about issues that are front and center for you as I am the elderly. And you better have that span and that ability to do all these things, because there's a lot of different people with a lot of different conditions and interests in this city that you have to be effective for. So I, for one, don't find any impediment whatsoever to age. I mean, there's people older than me. Preckwinkle's older than me. Daley's older than me. You know, and a lot of people have kind of made fun of those guys for being too old to do the job. I don't see it that way. I don't see it that way. I mean, there's one guy, a young guy, who's running in this race whose claim to fame is he's the youngest person running. But after that, you don't hear much about it. I mean, you know, he's just, you know, kind of
Who are you talking about?
a guy named Kozlar.
Oh, John
And
Kozlar.
which was seems like a nice young man, but you can't just base this on age. I mean, his whole campaign is based on the fact that he's 30. And great, okay, good, but what are you going to do for me, right? How are you going to make my life better? How are you going to make the streets safer, right? How are you going to make education better in this city? I mean, you have to be able to bring solutions and ideas to these really, really important matters that people care about. And some people can do that at the age of 72, and some people can do it at the age of 22. I mean, if I saw somebody in this race that was really impressive as a college student, I'd embrace it. I'd say it's great. I'm glad that we're seeing it. I hope we do see it one day. I don't think age should ever be a barrier, one way or the other.
But after you get elected.
Well, I'm right in the middle of these folks.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
But the other argument is, you know, that you've been in government, steeped in government for a long time. The experience is important, but
yeah.
Some folks say we need new voices. We need a fresh look.
That's called an election, and voters will make that decision. And I think it's up to us to make our cases to the voters about the issues that are important to them. And some will be more important to you than others. I mean, right now, Social Security is probably not at the top of your mind, but to other people it is. So I think that we have to speak in as broad a way as possible to as many people as possible. I mean, everybody here cares about safety, right? It's not an age matter, fresh face or not. If it were me, if I go to a surgeon, I'd like to know they have a little experience. I don't want a fresh face. And I don't think we do. So I think we have to be careful in judging people, not strictly on age. I mean, what do they do? What do they bring to the table? What has your experience been, not only in government, but in your private life? I mean, I've been a successful attorney for 32 years, and I have my own firm. We have 22 people working in our firm. I'm proud of that. I know how to make payroll. You guys really want to sweat at night? Own your own company and be responsible for people's paychecks every two weeks. That'll wake you up at night. It wakes me up at night sometimes. So, I mean, having that kind of experience both in the private sector and the public sector, I think, is important for people. And that also, and by the way, a lot of the lawyers I work with are way younger than me. And they're fantastic. They're really, and some of them come from this school right here. I mean, it's really a matter of putting it all together, blending the talents, and trying to produce, whether you're in the government, the best you can for the people, or in the private sector in the law firm for your clients.
Okay. Well, there are a number of issues that I've heard from some of the folks in this room before that they're concerned about. So I'd like to open it up and hear from you all questions. And we have somebody with a mic. If this young lady over here.
Hi, I'm Kaylee. I'm with the Gate Political Review, and I was wondering whether you would support a community benefits agreement for the Obama Presidential Center.
I already have, and I'm really surprised that we haven't had it yet. If you look at the agreement that's being talked about by a lot of the community organizations around here, it's basic stuff, it's sensible stuff, and what's in it for us for housing, jobs, the economic benefit, where's the footprint going to be, and I'm really surprised that we're having this debate. I mean, I know Barack Obama pretty well. Ran against him in 2004, knew him before that, and he cut his teeth in community organizing. And so I'm a little surprised that we're having this impasse right now.
Well, he's not in support of a community benefits agreement.
I said we're at an impasse.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought they would have said sure. Mm-hmm. Now, being a lawyer, if I could wear my other hat for a minute, the art is in what you negotiate in the agreement and how it's written. Who's to say that it has to be all one way? I don't think that has to be the stopper. But I generally would favor, whether you call it a community benefits agreement or a community agreement or impact agreement, whatever it is, I don't see why we couldn't come to terms on that. I don't think it should be a point of contention here. Community has been many, many years without a lot of economic resource. They see an opportunity to help better people in the neighborhood with housing, jobs. I'm worried. But I know they'll do the right thing by this because I already know some of the people working on this aspect of the project. Minority and women-owned companies that will do the work. I mean, that's going to be a hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars project. I want to see African Americans, Hispanics, and women doing that work.
So what will you do as mayor, since you say we're at an impasse now, what will you do to break that impasse and make that benefits agreement or whatever we call it happen?
There's points in time of a project where you have the leverage to bring the parties together to force them to do it. That's kind of sailed in this case because most of the agreements have already been approved by the city council for the land and the zoning. Mm-hmm. So I think on this case, unless the president has a different, has a change of heart, I don't know that it's going to be able to be done. Mm-hmm. But let me say this about it. Barack Obama is my friend, and I respect him and obviously what he's done. I think he's going to do right by people. I don't think this is going to go far afield. I mean, this is just a matter of the community feeling they want to articulate in the agreement specific goals and objectives, which is really not a bad thing. I mean, I've done a lot of these kinds of agreements. I don't know that I'd call them community benefits agreements, but in redevelopment agreements that are customary in the city, there are always objectives and goals vis-a-vis the community on employment, utilization of minority and women-owned contractors. So I really didn't see the big deal about not being able to come to some kind of agreement. Great question, though. Thank you.
The gate, by the way, is maybe we'll tell them a little bit more about what the gate is.
Oh, sure. It's a political review that's run through the IFB, and it's run through the IFB, and we report on anything political from Chicago level to internationally, and we're working on a voting guide for this upcoming election. So we'll be covering all of these events.
I hope you do.
Thank you.
Good question, though. It's a great project. We need that project desperately.
Hi, I'm Miranda with Common Cause Illinois. So you've talked a lot about different kinds of reform. I was wondering what your stance was on campaign reform and whether you would consider signing Common Cause Illinois' pledge on public campaign finance.
I said the other day I'm for public finance of campaigns. Whether we get there in my lifetime is going to be a whole other story. Whether we get there in your lifetime may be a whole other story. People have to be ready to do it, and they have to be ready to live by it. For me, I would do it. I don't have a problem raising money to run for elections because I work really hard at it, begging people. You know, most people don't know this, Laura, but if you lift up the curtain here, right before we came here and after we leave here, we are begging people for financial support. We are. That's just the nature of the beast. And you have to do that. It's not pleasant. It's not glamorous. It's drudgery. But it's the rules we have right now. Would I rather that somebody just sent me a check and said, here, do what you wish with it? Yeah, that's New York City, right? Works pretty well there. let's see if it happens. I mean, I said just 48 hours ago I'm in favor of it. Tony Preckwinkle and I were with some other of our colleagues on the stage, and we got the question. I said, yes, I think campaign finance, public finance of campaigns is the way we should be living.
It's interesting you bring up Tony Preckwinkle, because one of the reasons she's in trouble over the Burke scandal is because Ed Burke solicited a campaign contribution on her behalf, and there's questions about whether there was some quid pro quo involved. And is someone like you're out there begging for money every day? Doesn't it concern you that that's the kind of thing that could come back to haunt you and compromise you as an elected official?
No, I've been doing this for a lot of years, and people know me. I mean, you can give me 50 grand tomorrow. I'll take it. You got 50,000. I'll take it. And if you call and ask me to do something for you that I don't think is in the right decision or against the public interest, I ain't doing it. I'll give your money back.
What if they ask you to do something that you think is right, but
then what I think you have, well, first of all, let's be honest about it. The mayor of this city isn't making a lot of these decisions by him or herself. Let's be honest about it. I'll give you an example. Right now, they're deciding one of the largest city contracts in history for the design of the new international terminal at O'Hare. By the time that comes to the mayor, it will have gone through 3 committees, 2 commissioners, and who knows what else. It's going to be a fait accompli. There are not those kinds of decisions that are available to the mayor all day long the way it used to be. Things have really gotten tightened up and changed. To the extent there is any kind of appearance of conflict, you call it out, you disclose it, you put it on the public record, and you're transparent about it. And if you need to avoid being involved with it, you may need to avoid being involved with that decision. Those are the rules.
okay. Just to follow up on her, you were wanting to know whether or not he would be willing to sign.
I don't know if I've seen this current version.
Maybe.
You know, as a lawyer, sometimes the devil's in the details. So let me see what you got. But as a general principle, I am in favor of public finance campaigns. Kelsey Nilf is with our campaign. You can give her that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question. Well, while we're thinking about the questions, I was going to ask you about you gave an interview to the Sun-Times the other day, and there was a new poll out that shows you've been moving up, and you told Sun-Times you thought you had got the momentum in this campaign.
Yes.
Why do you say that, and then how are you? What is going to be your strategy with 14 people in this race to break through and get into the runoff?
Well, there have been 4 or 5 polls in the last 5-7 days that have us either tied for second, third place, but that top tier is all statistically basically in the same place by the margin of error. So it's not me hoping or wishing, I'm just looking at the data. And I think that is because we have shown very well in the debates and the forums. We have put a lot of money on television, back to our, you can spend your money however you wish, right? I mean, de Blasio in New York held every nickel of his public finance money and ran it on TV. I think he was smart. Why on TV? This is still the way people get their information. I mean, we have a lot of money on social media right now, but television, depending on what demographic you're talking about in terms of age and things like that, is still a very, very effective way to communicate. I mean, if you're watching The Voice or you're watching Chicago PD, I got to dance my image in front of you. Hopefully you're not TiVo or recording it and eliminating me. But I have to dance my image in front of you for that 30 seconds so you can get a glimpse of it and see and say, that guy doesn't look so bad. Maybe I'll think about him. And this is what it's about. This is how you communicate. But it's broadcast and cable television. It is social media. And we have probably the largest field network that any campaign has. We have 5 offices throughout the city, 2 south, Little Village, downtown, and northwest side. And we have, I think, a very sophisticated system of voter outreach. So we are doing that every day. And because of that, I think that's propelling us in the polls right now. All those things together.
And what is your strategy to win in terms of, this is a very demographically diverse city. There's some people who feel that there'll be a lot of race-based voting. There are going to be certain numbers of people in the African American community who are going to want to see an African American candidate, Latino, et cetera.
Well, that didn't happen with Rahm Emanuel in 2011. If he didn't have the African American support, he wouldn't be the mayor. I hope for a similar dynamic. I have gone every place in this city. In fact, one of my favorite places to go is with my friend Mays Jackson on WVON. And I don't subscribe to any of the stereotypes. I don't believe in them. I go every place and I talk to everybody. I'm here to tell you that we've been warmly received wherever we've gone in the city. It doesn't matter where. People are concerned about, generally speaking, the same issues. In some cases, you know, if you're in Hispanic neighborhoods, immigration is it's more of an issue. And sometimes in the African American community, it's police misconduct. And you have to recognize that and answer those questions in a straightforward way. I haven't ducked any of them. I mean, they asked me about Van Dyke. They asked me about the 3 officers that were acquitted. And you go on the record and you talk about it.
What is your opinion on the Van Dyke
I said the Van Dyke sentence was too light. And I said that I don't know how the judge ruled the way she did to acquit those 3 officers when 2 things. A few weeks earlier, 12 jurors concluded absolutely opposite. And use your own eyes. If you look at that dashboard cam, video cam, that young man was not lunging at the police, and that young man didn't get up after he was shot. That's what the accusations about manipulation of reports were. So how is justice advanced when people can't believe in basic stuff? If you don't believe in what the judge said in that trial, well, that doesn't advance justice. And if you don't, I don't believe that the sentence was long enough. So if people don't believe in the basic premise of the justice system, we're not in good shape. And I'm concerned about that. As a lawyer, for my whole life, I've cared about justice. I've worked an awful lot, even with the judiciary, about how we evaluate judges. You and I both lived through Greylord, one of the most insidious chapters in this city's history, where judges were taking payoffs to fix murder cases. This is a sad situation. We have to have a belief that our justice system is fair and honest for people to cooperate with the police. How about this? Respect the police. I mean, what you have right now, I mean, when I was growing up, my mom and dad said, police pull you over, say put your hands up, you just did it. Well, people aren't doing that so much anymore. And I believe it's all wound up with their perception of how they're going to be treated in the justice system. So we've got some work to do here.
Question? Yes, over here. Anybody else? No. Okay, we'll go back to you.
Thanks. I don't know if you know, we have the University of Chicago Police Department here on this topic of justice and policing. They have a lot of the same powers as the CPD, but they aren't subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So I don't.
University
The
place?
University Police, yeah. So I wondered how you felt about that, and if you would support more regulation over our University Police Department.
Well, it's a tough question because clearly if you're a public employee and you're working for the government, you're subject to FOI, Freedom of Information Act. But we generally haven't made that applicable to the private sector. I'm on the board of the Navy Pier, the Navy Pier Board, and we just went through an extensive case about whether or not we at Navy Pier, a private not-for-profit, basically like a museum board, are subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And we argued that we were not. Why? You're going to change the entire nature of these boards with people wanting to serve and wanting to be a part of them if you take this too far. Police might be a little bit of a different condition because with arrest powers and the powers that they have in general, we may need to have transparency and information about what happened. I mean, for example, reports. If a police officer, a university police officer stops a student here, right, and then later on it's determined that there was harassment or misconduct of some kind, the only way you're going to be able to get at it is through a lawsuit with the information that's exchanged during discovery. So it's a tough situation. I really don't, policing may be a kind of a unique area, but I really don't want to tell the University of Chicago that they've now become a public institution and have to divulge all their records. I think you'd create a lot of chaos and anarchy here with these private institutions. But I see your point about police being a little bit unique, and I'd be open to talking about it and looking at it further. Yeah.
Questions? I think just one other quick follow-up on policing. You have said that you would, as mayor, you would fire Superintendent Eddie Johnson.
Yes.
Why? And And then where does that leave you? What kind of a superintendent would you be looking for as mayor?
Well, the reason I want to let Eddie Johnson go is I want a fresh start. I want to pick somebody who I think is going to be completely aligned with the new way of thinking about really caring about community policing, really trying to get the guns off the street, and rebuilding divisions within the police department like the detective ranks.
And you don't think Eddie Johnson would be in favor? I mean, I know he's talked
forget about
fervently about guns on the
favor.
street, and he's talked about community policing. You don't believe he would be
What
on
are
board
you-
for those?
What are you doing? I mean, I'm a manager who's going to expect the best from my people. I haven't heard one peep out of Eddie Johnson about needing 300 detectives. We don't solve any murders in this city. We solve less than 20% of the murders in this city go solved. In New York and Los Angeles, it's in excess of 80%. Community policing has fallen to such a low level that the consent decree had to call for its comeback. I mean, that is not the sign of success in a manager to me. And you can bet your bottom dollar on this. I am not going to be a mayor that sits there with mediocre performance. I mean, the people can't take it. I mean, people need somebody who's sharp. I've also had some questions about Eddie Johnson's handling of police misconduct reviews. I mean, there's an entire news article that chronicles some of the cases that are they need some questions asked about this. I think you need a fresh start for people to believe.
And does that fresh start have to come from within the police department, or
I think there's a lot of talent here in the Chicago Police Department. I've met a lot of officers, people moving up in the ranks, women, who can really be outstanding candidates. And so I would certainly prefer to look for homegrown talent. I don't think you absolutely limit it to that, or there's a lot of people you take out of the contention. But I think there's a lot of talent here in the Chicago Police Department. Look, we talk about the police on one side of the spectrum, you know, that all this bad stuff. But we have some outstanding officers who do a great job, and we lost 3 officers in the last month and a half. One who put his life at risk to save people at Mercy Hospital. Can you imagine if that gunman hadn't been stopped by the police and had started to walk the halls with patients? That could have been a horrible situation. What about the 2 officers, young officers with families, that went on the railroad embankment to chase who they thought was a shooter? Turns out it really wasn't a dangerous situation, but you don't know that at that time. And they were both hit by a train. So, I mean, there's a lot of heroism in that department, and this is the stuff we hear about. I heard about a police officer the other day that was called to a school where a student was misbehaving. Turned out the student has mental health issues, and that officer coddled that young child and took that young child to a facility where they can get care. And so there's a lot of acts and deeds that these officers perform every day that don't go talked about, don't get written about. So, I mean, I've just seen this. And we need the police, Laura. There's just no way around it. We need the police to be a part of our lives so that we're safe. We all call the same people when we're in trouble. We just need to draw that balance again between respect on both sides of the line. And we've got to make sure that all the decisions made are ones that we can all believe in.
One more question? Final up here.
What's your plan to reform the justice system particularly in terms of the acquittal of the 3 officers and the Van Dyke?
This is why I want new leadership in the police department. I believe it starts at the top. You know, we have some history in this city where we had scandal plaguing the police department in late 50s, early 60s. And Richard J. Daley, talk about breaking the mold, went completely out of the norm and brought in a non-police officer leader from California by the name of Orlando Wilson. So sometimes these things become so bad that you have to really think outside the box for who your leader is going to be. I think having a leader and I'm going to have to spend probably an enormous amount of time interviewing and thinking about the characteristics you want in this person. But I want somebody who can model behavior. Everybody's talking about the code of silence, right? If you don't want a code of silence, you need a leader at the top with the backbone, the charisma, and general character that can lead us in how to do these things properly. And says, you know what, Senior Detective so-and-so, Get off of that. You're not rewriting the report to fit your narrative. Write the truth. Write the truth. So leadership is going to get us a whole distance into making this cultural in the police department. The other thing that's going to help us is the consent decree. 250-page report that covers every topic you can imagine. And one of the topics that I'm very concerned about is police training. Police training. I think we ought to have the best trained police force in the United States to deal with people with mental health issues, to deal with how we interact with our citizens, a whole number of things, and we're not there right now. So just to give you a start of the discussion, leadership and following and implementing the consent decree should help us make our way toward that place we want to be. And make no mistake about it, the fact that those police officers were prosecuted and that Jason Van Dyke was prosecuted, but let me say something about Van Dyke, okay? There were 8 police on the scene that night when Laquan McDonald was shot and killed. He was murdered. Only 1 fired. Only 1 fired. The other 7 didn't fire a shot. So it's about exercising judgment, good judgment in situations too. And most of the police officers in this city have good judgment, especially when it comes to life or death situations. So I want to put the problem in the proper context. As far as the code of silence and cover-up goes, we have some work to do there. But please don't underestimate the fact that they were prosecuted in the first place and the impact that will have on other officers' actions down the road.
You're absolutely right. That was historic. There hasn't been a police officer convicted for murder in the line of duty in 50 years.
Forever.
So
yeah.
Maybe it's a small step toward change.
There isn't an officer out there that won't think twice, 3, and 4 times right now before they fire a shot in that situation or manipulate a report on what happened.
Well, thank you, sir. This has been an excellent conversation.
Thank you, Laura. Always pleasure.